So yeah, in terms of what I'll kind of present today is just a very generic kind of overview around kind of what's basically happening in the UK, and I will focus more on Wales, as that is where I currently live and work. So we've got some quite innovative kind of harm reduction stuff going on in Wales, which when I was recently in Lisbon at the European Monitoring Centre, they were quite astonished really in terms of things that were happening in Wales that just wasn't happening elsewhere in Europe. So, and I'll explain a little bit further really around that. As I am from very far away, obviously no one's going to know anything about me, so very quickly, currently I work for Drugaid Cymru. So I've worked for the organisation for nearly 7 years now. I basically moved straight into substance misuse field after doing my master's degree in addictive behaviour at Liverpool University. So I've held many kind of positions within Drugaid, from a young persons worker to adult services manager, young person and family service manager to training coordinator. So actually my role has changed since I kind of did the blog. So I'm no longer a service manager, I'm kind of training coordinator now, which hopefully I will lose a little bit less hair. It's going to be hopefully a little bit less stressful as well. In terms of the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, so as Bruce said, basically these guys fund UK citizens to research anything that would hopefully better the UK in that specific field. So if you want to look at how to make your grass greener, for example, as long as you put a good kind of argument, they may potentially fund you for that. So in terms of my fellowship, what I'm looking at is basically the procedures and the policies associated to setting up what we would term a medically supervised injecting centre, or what we in Wales are going to potentially call them enhanced harm reduction centres. So I've kind of visited ones in Barcelona. We've gone over to Ireland, as they are potentially going to be establishing one later on this year, and they went the whole hog in terms of actually changing their Misuse of Drugs Act. They were really lucky that they had a politician that was very much motivated in terms of getting that, getting the changes pushed through. So I've kind of seen some of the facilities in action, so it's kind of good to come over to Canada. So I was in Toronto last week, so visiting a couple of places that will be some of the locations for facilities in that city, and the same will be for when we go to Seattle and also Calgary, and hopefully whilst I'm in Vancouver I will visit some of the overdose prevention sites and also Insight as well from there. And then later on this year I'll be visiting Hamburg, which are purely drug consumption rooms, so they don't actually have any kind of medical kind of aspect to it in terms of the staffing, and also they have women only kind of injecting rooms there as well, which will be interesting to see from there. So just in case you don't know where Wales is, which I'm sure everybody does, but ultimately where I'm based is in Swansea, and then obviously you've got Cardiff just to the east. But in terms of Drugaid, as Bruce said, we're the largest treatment provider service in Wales. So we literally go from the border, so kind of where Chepstow is, all the way to Aberystwyth. We cover that whole section apart from Cardiff. So we pretty much are taking over Wales, probably will do definitely in the next 10 years probably as well. So just to give you an idea really in terms of what we provide, these are just a few things. The name will change. It's not a great name, I'm not going to lie. Basically, I used to work for an organisation called Swansea Drugs Project, or SANS, and we merged with Drugaid a year and a half ago. And since then, our kind of service users have said they absolutely hate this name, because if you send in letters to other professionals, they basically know who you are, and your confidentiality has gone straight out the window. So when we were previously SANS, you kind of didn't really know who they are unless you actually knew that we were a drugs project. So very kind of briefly, just to give you an idea really in terms of the kind of work that I'm involved in. So basically in our Swansea project we have a drop-in and needle exchange. Our needle exchange accounts for 25% of all the transactions throughout Wales. So that kind of gives you an idea really in terms of our injecting drug use culture in Swansea. Vast amount obviously heroin users, and probably just below in terms of statistics percentage is steroid users. So we have a massive issue in terms of image enhancing performance drugs. The main kind of piece of work that we do is around one-to-one support. So everybody who's referred to our service will kind of get a key worker, and they'll have one-to-one support. They could be referred to our family service. So that's, for example, parents who are using substances and ultimately have an impact on their children. So we work very closely with social services, child protection, safeguarding procedures, a part and parcel of that. Tenancy support, so we have a dedicated team helping individuals with housing-related issues, young persons, so up to the age of 25. When I first moved to Swansea about 6 years ago, we had probably about between 20 to 30 young people from about the age of 16 to 19 on a Mephedrone script. Fast forward 7 years, we've probably got about 2. So our trends are constantly changing, and I'm sure they probably do here as well. We have a Drink Wise Age Well, so that's for the over 50s in terms of alcohol consumption. Out of work service, so for people who obviously out of work, trying to get back into education, employment, diversion activities. And probably one of the biggest things that we do day in, day out is around naloxone and dry blood spot testing as well. So kind of rapid access in terms of HIV and Hep C testing with regards to that. And obviously we then have referral pathways to the likes of prescribing likes of methadone and Subutex and Suboxone as well. So just to give you an idea, unfortunately this isn't the greatest survey, but it's one of our main ones. So this is actually government-led, the crime survey for England and Wales. They literally knock on people's doors, say, I'm from the government, have you used drugs in the last 12 months? So you can imagine actually not many people are quite honest and open in terms of their response. But pretty much as throughout the world, the UK is absolutely no different in terms of cannabis being the number one in terms of illicit substance use that is actually used. What we've seen over the last few years is massive issues around NPS, or legal highs, what we would term new psychoactive substances. We basically brought in a blanket ban May last year, and prior to that the UK accounted for a quarter of all NPS users throughout Europe. So not only are we good at taking ecstasy, we're very good at taking NPS as well with that. What we did find though, in terms of the vast amount of research that's been done in the UK around NPS, is that about 90% of the NPS users already use illicit drugs. So we had a lot of kind of media hysteria saying that these drugs are readily available on the internet and in shops, and basically young people, it's just really accessible for them. But actually not very many young people who'd never taken drugs before went straight for these drugs. It was primarily people who were already using drugs anyway from there. One of the big motivators for us in terms of looking at medically supervised injecting centre is around our drug-related deaths. A recent report came out from the European Monitoring Centre which actually found that 1 in 3 deaths in Europe are based in the UK, which is quite a startling statistic really. For us as an organisation, we're low threshold, we're a street agency, so literally anybody can come through the door. There's another organisation in Swansea that is more based on the 12 steps abstinence model. So the different type of individuals that access the services are very different. So for us, we very much see the more chaotic individuals, people with housing issues, homelessness, quite severe mental health issues, and obviously substance misuse related issues as well. So actually we see a lot of overdoses. On average, we probably see at least 1 overdose a week, which probably for you guys, compared to obviously what's happening in BC, is nowhere near, but obviously for us, in terms of our population, is a lot smaller, but hopefully, fingers crossed for us, we won't see anything what's happening with you guys, unfortunately. Our drug-related deaths are the highest since records began. So what we're basically seeing is within the UK, the shameful kind of policies really that literally the UK government, and obviously we've just had a general election, and unfortunately the Conservatives are back in, but they basically have the stance that the drug policies are working, which again, you know, in terms of the statistics, they just aren't at all. So in relation obviously to the likes of opiates, they pretty much doubled in terms of drug-related deaths just in the last 3 years alone. Wales, for us, we were steadily declining in terms of our DRDs, but unfortunately they've kind of risen, and we're expecting them to rise again in the next set of statistics as well. So during her campaign, Theresa May was doing a kind of live Q&A on ITV, one of the main channels in the UK, and it was asked about in terms of medical cannabis. She said absolutely no way, because that leads on to using the likes of heroin. So unfortunately, yeah, in terms of having more progressive harm reduction kind of policies, such as that one, is at the minute a complete no-go. There's been lots of documents kind of highlighted in terms of how we would go through it, in terms of setting up some form of medical cannabis market, or even a regulated legal market. But at the minute, the UK government is saying that it's a complete no-go. In the UK, we also have the ACMD, the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. They probably became more well-known back in about 2011. Their chairman at the time, Professor David Nutt, basically he famously got sacked for speaking the truth. Basically, he came out and said that horse riding is more dangerous than taking ecstasy, which statistically in the UK is true, and also said that LSD is safer than alcohol, which again the government didn't like at all. The ACMD actually last year said that as a way to try and curb and manage these drug-related deaths, and obviously to reduce them, is to establish injecting facilities. The government straight away said no, not a cat and hell's chance. David Cameron, actually, our previous Prime Minister, back in 2002, actually said that we should start to implement these. But obviously things change once you come into power from there as well. The ACMD, for example, so they're the government's right-hand man in drug and drug policy. They said, for example, cat should not be made illegal in the UK, because we had about 90,000 cat users, predominantly Somalian communities, Yemen communities. They said, yeah, not to make it illegal, because obviously it would just drive more people into the criminal world, so to speak. The government said, no, we're making it illegal. So obviously the government know best as well. In terms of what this stands for is payment by results. So we're really lucky in Wales, and staying with Scotland, it's very much harm reduction focused. England is stagnating and it's going backwards. Basically in England, the UK government is very abstinent focused. Now Liverpool was one of the first cities in the UK to have a needle exchange. A year ago, when I was last up there, they had one needle exchange in the whole city, which is absolutely crazy. In terms of payment by results, so this is kind of like a contract that's been put in place for certain treatment services, which says that you will only get paid when an individual comes through your door, and after 6 or 12 months they're no longer taking drugs, they're housed and they're in employment. So what you tend to find then is those organisations, to the most chaotic, most marginalised and vulnerable individuals, they'll stop them at the door and they say, go somewhere else, because we're not going to get paid for you, because we're not going to see you improving in the next 6 to 12 months. As I said, Wales, we're really lucky, we do not have that whatsoever. In Wales, we've got the Welsh Government, they've got devolved powers, so ultimately our kind of drug policies in terms of treatment is with them. Obviously the kind of law is back with Westminster, with the UK government. And probably one of the most shameful things that have come out recently is what's known as our Psychoactive Substance Act. So this is our blanket ban for new psychoactive substances, and basically the definition of a drug that is to be banned under this is anything that causes a psychoactive effect. So it was completely rushed through, and it's just banned potentially a whole load of substances that could either be used for medicinal purposes, and we'll never find out, or at least it makes it a hell of a lot harder for those people to do the research around it. What they did as well, the likes of nitrous oxides, very, very low risk substance, is grouped with fentanyl. And basically you can get the same punishment in terms of up to 7 years in prison for supplying either of those. So there's no kind of disparity between the drugs. So these are just some of our kind of very stigmatizing media clips that have come out. So synthetic cannabinoids, or spice as the media tends to refer them as, something that we've had massive issues with in Swansea, but also across Wales as well. People obviously labelling these individuals as zombies now, and this is something that we're seeing a lot of issues with right now, actually. And here's Professor David Nutt, and obviously he's one of the leading researchers, but he came out very much against the kind of legislation that came in last year, the psychoactive substance ban, again highlighting that it will end potential research around new drugs. So literally under this ban, even drugs that have never been produced before are already illegal. So kind of moving away really from the shameful thing. So this is kind of Wales specific. So this is WEDINOS. I'm not going to tell you what it stands for because I can't remember. But just as in drugs, we love acronyms. So basically WEDINOS is funded by the Welsh Government, and it's literally a testing service. So this is the service that when I went to the European Monitoring Centre in Lisbon, it was for new psychoactive substances, and I did a presentation about what's happening in Wales. There were 17 other European countries there as well being represented, and none of them had this. So basically WEDINOS is a harm reduction tool. So what we can do with this is we quite literally, if we had an individual service user in front of us and they'd taken a substance, and they've been taking that drug for, let's say, a matter of years, and then this one time it was completely different outcome, we could say to that person, okay, have you got any more? What we can do is we can send it off to WEDINOS, and then they can test it. And literally then we can give that harm reduction information back to that person and say, look, this was actually what was in your drug. If you carry on getting your drugs from this drug dealer, be careful, because this might be in your drugs, for example. But they will not test purity for it though. So to give you an example, it can come via multiple routes. So for us as kind of treatment providers, we would take it to our local police station. So within Wales we've got 4 police forces. All of them are on board. I've been to our police station in Swansea before, and I've kind of gone in to say, oh, I've got some drugs, it's hand to WEDINOS, and the person on the desk had absolutely no idea what WEDINOS was. So you could imagine they were like, you got drugs. So yeah, sometimes people know what's going on, other people in the police station don't. But obviously if you've got about 20 packs worth and a few bongs and paraphernalia, then you're going to look a bit suspicious, of course. But if you just got the 1 pack, then obviously it's fine. So ultimately, yeah, you take it to your local police station, and then it will go via their internal mail to the Llandoch toxicology, which is near Cardiff. You can send them via the post, but obviously if your postman knows what WEDINOS is, then your sample may not get there, who knows. So there's different kind of transportation routes that you can send the drugs off to. So just to give you an idea, they will test the sample, and actually what they found in some of the samples being sent within Wales is actually drugs that have never been seen in Europe before, and obviously some drugs that have never been seen in the UK before. So again, we're able to kind of see what the trends are in different areas, because again, in each sample is attached kind of the area where it came from. So again, you know, some of these we can just be aware, and if they're seeing lots of a specific sample, for example, some of the N-bombs, the hallucinogens, we could then potentially put warnings out and so forth from there. So just to give you an example, if you go on the WEDINOS website, if you've got nothing better to do, then you can quite literally scroll through all of their samples. So when you send them off, basically you have a tamper evidence bag, and then you have a bit of paperwork which you fill out with the individual. And on the paperwork it's such as, what did you think this drug was, what the desired effects, kind of how do you take it, and so forth. So ultimately, as long as you fill out the paperwork, this section will all be filled out too. So they'll give you a picture of what actually the drug is, and then just some of the information there as well. So the person that bought this drug, for example, thought it was just herbal peace, so potentially a new psychoactive substance, a legal drug, but actually what was in it was ketamine. So again, you could say to that individual, okay, these are potentially the reasons why you experience these effects and not these that you actually expected from there as well. And then again, what we had a lot of is our service users, when these drugs were legal, the new psychoactive substances, they would actually kind of go down the street and be very blasé about it, very open about it. And obviously from this we could say, actually, you're carrying a Class B drug on you. You may not think it, but you've got to be very careful. So you may think it's legal, but actually it's not. Again, one of the big issues that we're seeing in the UK right now is our ecstasy. Going back about 2010, a lot of our ecstasy tablets in the UK didn't have any MDMA in them whatsoever. Now we're seeing MDMA which potentially reaching up to 250 to 300 milligrams in each tablet. We're really lucky in the UK that we've got an organisation called The Loop, who basically now are going into all the major kind of UK festivals and doing drug testing on site. So it only started last year, and a lady called Fiona Measham, who's basically taken the lead in that, has kind of been internationally recognised really for her work. So it's kind of groundbreaking that that's actually happening from there. So obviously, again, from this sample, it was actually what kind of said on the tin, really. This is one of my favourites. So this person thought they were getting ecstasy, but actually it was an erectile dysfunction tablet as well. So I don't think he got very far on that one, maybe. And then again, the likes of this person thought they'd get MDMA, but they were getting alpha PVP, so quite a different type of substance in terms of some of the effects. And then again, this person, thought they were getting natural cannabis, but actually they were getting synthetic cannabinoids. So again, it could have been a very much more hallucinogenic experience than what they were actually expecting from there as well. So what they've done, basically, Wedinos, this is their latest one. So they kind of done like the music chart, so top 10. And what they found basically in the last, the back end of last year, so synthetic cannabinoid was number one. That was the main substance that they found in all of their samples. Mephedrone, which unfortunately we termed or nicknamed Meow Meow, absolutely awful. But a stimulant type drug. We saw a lot of injecting issues with Mephedrone, especially in Swansea when we had a heroin drought about 2012. A lot of our heroin users went on to Mephedrone. Excuse the French, but it smells like cat's piss and rotten fish. So you kind of knew when people were using it. But basically when people inject it, it lasts for about an hour, hour and a half, and then they were re-injecting. So we had people that were injecting up to 20, 25 times a day, and they were doing it in very unhygienic kind of environments. They were doing it sharing paraphernalia, reusing paraphernalia, so we saw a lot of abscesses. We even saw quite a few amputations as well from there. And the third one down, MDMA Chimica, basically there was a European warning associated to that synthetic cannabinoid, as it was associated to numerous deaths throughout Europe. So again, completely different to obviously what you'd expect with natural cannabis from there. And most of those I can't say, so there we are. Okay. So one of the big things, again, that we're really lucky in Wales is in terms of our recovery. So this is actually in Wales, our definition of recovery. So as I said, in England, it's very much abstinence focused, whereas for us, it's not just stipulated to drug and alcohol. It can be basically anything that's associated to that and a reduction in that. So for us as a service, even for me when I'm working with an individual, I don't necessarily bring my own definition of recovery to the agenda. It's basically whatever that person in front of me believes it is, and I'll work with that, or we will work with that. So for us as an organisation, we see somebody going to a needle exchange for the first time as recovery. We see it very much as a journey, and basically it's got to start somewhere from there, and then we'll work with those individuals to whatever their needs are. So just to give you an idea really in terms of substance use in Wales, so those are the unique number of individuals that have accessed needle exchange programs throughout the whole of Wales, and you can kind of see actually that the likes of steroids is actually a little bit more than opioids in terms of the reasons why people are accessing these exchanges, and new psychoactive substances is a new one on there as well. For us as a service, alcohol is obviously the number one for us, but heroin is very, very close behind. So again, this is just Wales whole, so heroin is the big one really in terms of illicit substance use. Swansea was very much amphetamine-based city up until about 10-15 years ago, which then changed to heroin. At the minute right now, we're actually seeing a little bit of a heroin drought, mainly because there's been a couple of high-profile busts in terms of dealers in other parts of the UK that supply to Swansea and nearby cities. So our heroin at the minute in terms of purity is, you're probably looking at around 15%. So one of our biggest concerns is around fentanyl. There's been a couple of samples now that have been identified through Wedinos, that fentanyl's in the country. There's been a couple of deaths associated to fentanyl in the northeast of England as well. So it's something that we are very much kind of looking out for, and obviously something that I'm trying to learn as well whilst I'm here in terms of the best response to it as well from there. And then, as I already mentioned, in terms of drug-related deaths, so in Wales as a whole, 168 in 2015, which was a big increase from the year before. And as I said, we expect that to kind of rise in the next year, in the next set of statistics, which I think will come out about September as well. Okay. So, one of the things obviously that all treatment services work towards, and this was a 10-year strategy that actually runs out next year. They're doing consultations, the Welsh Government at the minute, for the next strategy, but we will work towards working together to reduce harm. So even there, it's harm reduction through and through. And in terms of the main kind of actions, they're kind of just listed there. But again, you know, we very much see in terms of reducing harm to the wider community, not just the individuals. A big report came out in 2003. It was known as the Hidden Harm Report, in terms of the amount of young people and children that are affected by families and parental substance use. So that is how basically our family service was created due to the findings from that report. Our family service, to give you an idea, we got 3.5 staff, and basically they hold caseloads around 35 each. So quite heavy caseloads. And thankfully we don't have waiting lists, but there's probably an argument to say that we should, because to juggle 35 cases is quite a lot for those guys. But at the same time, we don't want waiting lists either. For our prescribing, for example, you could see waiting lists being up to 3 months, which again is a huge barrier for some people in terms of their recovery as well. So the take-home naloxone program basically got piloted in 2008, and it was just at the time a response to try and deal with the increasing numbers of drug-related deaths associated to opioids. So Swansea was one of the main pilots for that, and obviously in terms of Swansea, it's number 1 in relation to drug-related deaths in the whole of Wales as well. It's number 9, I believe, in the whole of the UK. From there as well. So it's 2008 basically it first came on. So this was our kind of initial set. So we use intramuscular. Intranasal is far too expensive for us. So we use the intramuscular. So this is our old kit. So it was literally, you had to put everything together. You had to draw up from the ampule. So it was just kind of one kit, or one dose per kit, should I say. So for us, I think our record when we were using that was about 11 or 12 kits on one individual. It may have been more, but we don't use oxygen either. So again, that's something that I will take back in terms of recommendation. But a kit like this for us would cost us around £15. So I think that's probably about $20 each kit. Come about a year or two ago, we changed to what's known as Prenoxad, and it's much, much better. So we got 5 doses in these, and they're pre-filled. So the naloxone's already in the barrel. All we have to do then is attach the pin to it, and you're good to go. And then you've got markers then to say basically how from 1 to the 5th dose. So what they say in the training is, go down to number 1, wait 2 or 3 minutes, and if still not responsive, go down to 2, and so on. So again, I think our record for this, I think we've used 11 kits of this one as well. So 55 doses for one individual. And I think that individual actually overdosed about 6 times in 2 weeks, if I remember correctly as well. So thankfully, this is the kit that we now use, and it's a hell of a lot more better. And I think in terms of the cost, it's around the same now, actually. They've been able to reduce the cost. So around $20, £15 for one kit. So for us as a take-home naloxone kind of program, so basically, person would come in, we would say the training takes 5 to 10 minutes. We can give it basically to service user, to families, to whoever. And then we would give them 2 kits then. One obviously to carry on at all times, and another to kind of keep in a safe space. So since 2009, these are from the most recent evaluation from Public Health Wales of our take-home naloxone program. So we're looking at around just over 25,000 opioid users in the whole of Wales, but less than that are actually engaging with specialised needle exchange programs. So what we find in Wales actually is 60% of our injecting drug users access only pharmacies. They will not access provisions like ourselves. So for example, in pharmacies, they cannot get naloxone, they cannot get tested for the likes of Hep C, HIV. So we've got a mass proportion of injecting drug users who aren't getting that other harm reduction interventions there as well from there. So since 2009, so just over 10,000 kits have been issued, and unfortunately the last statistic, there's been 11 fatalities where naloxone has been administered since 2009. So just some stats really from there. What we tend to find is the vast proportion are males, and then you're looking at kind of a mean age of just under 37 from there as well. And in terms of the naloxone kits being used, last year, 433 kits were used in terms of specific events as well. And thankfully, in 2015, so going on nearly 2 years now, before the legislation changed, basically only a medical kind of practitioner could give out naloxone, could only prescribe it, so we were very much reliant upon nurses and doctors. So for us as a service, we only have nurses that do drop-in clinics once a week, so we were only able to prescribe once a week, unless we were really lucky to get a nurse to come and do it there and then. But since October 2015, it changed, so basically anybody within our service, including myself, can just do the training and give out the naloxone, which has changed basically the game pretty much for us, and it's made it so much easier. It's made it a lot easier in England as well, because England, before the ban, it was literally a postcode lottery. So if you lived in one area, then literally you could get naloxone, but if you lived 5 miles down the road, you may not be able to get it. It was literally like that. It was kind of a jackpot if you were able to get it. But again, as I said, the UK in terms of England, its harm reduction is being pushed to the side. For us then, kind of moving on to our injecting facility. So this is from Welsh Government, and actually what they stated, and it's just one sentence, that as a way to try and reduce drug-related deaths, they want to continue gathering evidence around the effectiveness of medically supervised injecting centres. So we've kind of clung on to that as an organisation, and we're kind of sticking that to the Welsh Government and say, look, this is what you said, and this is what we're going to work towards. So for us as organisation, we actually started a steering group last year, so we've only been going a year. We're very much in our infancy, and it was literally just our services started it off, and then we started to think about what type of individuals we need to get involved. So we've got some police crime commissioners. So the police crime commissioners, they are basically, they pull the strings with all the police forces. They look at the funding, they look at the budgets, and ultimately the direction that police forces go in. So for us, in terms of establishing a facility, they're our main target. We've got one in North Wales, Arfon Jones, and basically he wants to make all drugs legal. He wants these facilities. He wants everything changed in terms of drug policy. So he's very much on our group and very much on board with us as well. In terms of third sector, so that's organisations like ourselves, the voluntary sector, homelessness, organisation in Cardiff as well. We've got service user reps. We've got academics looking at the evidence. Welsh Government are on board, but they're only observers. They don't actually contribute to anything. And then Public Health is also on board as well from there. So for us, at the minute, we had a meeting actually the day before I flew out, so a week last Friday, and our actions now is actually to look at key stakeholders who we need to go and interact with, who are going to be our biggest kind of opposition, who's going to challenge us the most, and also we're going to start looking at the kind of models in terms of the operations side of the facility from there. As I said, in terms of the main reasons why we're looking at this, what we find in Swansea is that 70% of our injecting drug users are Hep C positive. Thankfully, our HIV rates are really low. That is a completely different story in Scotland. Scotland are going to be the first one, probably in the UK, to establish such a facility. They're looking at locations at the minute, but they're estimating the cost will be around £2.3 million a year, which is just an unbelievable sum and something that the Welsh Government will not fund us for. So for us as a challenge, funding is a massive kind of barrier in terms of setting these facilities up. But yeah, Glasgow is probably going to be the first one to set up a facility in the UK. As I said, Swansea's number one in terms of drug-related deaths in Wales, and actually I've done a lot of work with our kind of local authority in Swansea, looking at basically the biggest hindrance to children and young people accessing playgrounds, parks, recreation areas is discarded paraphernalia. So again, we're kind of going down that route. And the route that we're going down isn't necessarily about saving lives, it's about how we can protect and make it a better community for all, rather than actually going down the routes of specific drug users themselves. So for us, in terms of to set up such a facility, we're very different to you guys. As I said, I kind of spent a bit of time in Toronto talking to Public Health there, Sean Hopkins at the Works, and Toronto Drug Strategy, and obviously they explained in terms of the exemptions and the legislation. Thankfully, we do not have to go anything like that. So for us, a letter of comfort is all we need. So basically, our letter of comfort would be going to the police crime commissioners and saying, can we operate these facilities? And if we do, please don't arrest the guys that come into our service. It's exactly the same as what we've got in terms of a letter of comfort for our needle exchanges. So basically, the police cannot arrest individuals for possession of drugs in and around our facility when accessing our services from there as well. So we're very much in the infancy in terms of our setting up a medically supervised injecting centre. So we've identified 3 locations, so Swansea obviously being one of them. The good thing for us is that we do have the space in our location, in our building. We own our building as well, and it's exactly the same in what's known as the Huggard Centre, which is a homelessness charity in Cardiff, and also in Wrexham as well. There's buildings there that are already owned. So we've got the locations in terms of the buildings, but obviously now we just got to kind of push it through really. The main reasons for those 3 locations is obviously in terms of just the need in terms of injecting drug use there as well. What we do see, for example, in our project in Swansea, people injecting our toilets, which ultimately we would say brilliant, but legally, obviously it's a no-go for us at the minute. So if we were able to get that letter of comfort, the police are on board, ultimately the Home Office then, the UK government, they cannot do anything about it. They can scream and shout, but they can't do anything about it. So thankfully we don't need to go down the route of like what Ireland did and change kind of the wording of their Misuse of Drugs Act as well. So just to give you an idea, this is Swansea on a nice day. So this is actually our building here, and it's pretty much in the centre of town. It kind of goes onto a main street as well. So, but this is one of our back alleys. So what we've had, for example, just down the road to the right, there was a derelict house, I think 3 or 4 floors, and it was covered in needles, pins, discarded paraphernalia. We actually attended quite a few overdoses in that facility, or in that kind of derelict house, should I say, numerous times, which as a manager then I was telling staff to absolutely not go in there, but ultimately it was saving someone's life. Also you had kind of garages here as well, which have actually now been done up, but people injecting literally at the back of our project as well. Again, similar kind of scenes that you will obviously see in BC as well. So we do have quite a high concentration of homeless population in Swansea. So again, as I said, there's quite a lot of individuals that access our service who are homeless. So scenes like these are pretty common as well. And again, just in terms of, this isn't far from our project. Again, people are actually living here, sleeping, and obviously injecting drug use as well. We've also got what's known as Junkie Jungle. So just a word of warning, there is human feces on the next one. Okay. So again, this was taken at Junkie Jungle, so it was literally about a 5-minute walk from our project. And again, in this facility, there were pins, there were condoms, there were sleeping bags, pillows, there was a tent up there as well. Basically people obviously doing all kinds of things in these environments as well. And again, the pictures just speak for themselves in terms of what we see. So in terms of Swansea, it's not something that is just across the whole of the city. When we went to Dublin, Tony Duffin, who's a director of Anna Liffey there, who's taken the lead in supervised injecting facilities in Ireland. He took us around Temple Bar, which is the main kind of tourist area in Dublin, and it was there for all to see. Thankfully in Swansea we don't have that, but we have concentrated pockets, and most of them are around our kind of facility. So for us to actually say, look, let's put such a facility in our building already, then we got the evidence to say that actually most people who are doing this are doing it in the area anyway, so it's just going to make everything a lot better, from hygienic environment to the scenery in the city as well. And then what we tend to find is obviously, again, we recently had a conference, a national conference. We do one every year, and the last one was on drug-related deaths. And again, we had a guy come down the day before who does a lot of kind of professional photography. So these are some of his photos. And again, this was up in Junkie Jungle, and basically what he found when he was up there were, again, there were pins that were actually in the mud, but they were sticking up. So he actually quite literally had to go on the rocks. He couldn't put his feet on any of the mud, because obviously just in case he gets a needle stick injury there as well. Okay. So for us, basically, we are working towards it. As I said, in terms of the reason why I'm here over in Canada for 3 weeks in total is just to learn about the processes of setting such a facility up. It's something that we definitely need in Swansea. The stats I've kind of mentioned speak for themselves, really, but also the pictures go a long way, and it's something that we've kind of put forward to our police crime commissioners. It's something we put forward kind of unofficially to police officers as well. When I've done training, a lot of police officers have said, well, why don't you just provide a facility where individuals can do it kind of in a clean environment? Local businesses are very much on board, and they actually think we already do it. Some even think we give them the drugs as well, which we have to say, we don't do that. Which we'd like to, of course, but yeah, so there's already kind of local residents and people on board. But as I said, one of our key challenges, one of our key actions at the minute is identifying the individuals and the organisations that just wouldn't go for this. And that's basically our next step really as well. We're going to be a little bit different to Glasgow. As I said, Glasgow, you're looking at around £2.3 million, so probably around $3 million annually. And they're also going to go down the route of heroin-assisted treatment as well. It's something that we will not kind of look at. Personally, I don't know why, but it's something that we thought, okay, we're just going to take one step at a time. We're not going to go for the whole hog straight away from there. So, yeah, that's literally where we're at. I again just want to thank kind of Amanda and Kate and Bruce. And it's my first ever international kind of talk as well, so it's quite cool to do in Victoria, if I'm honest with you. So yeah, you can, if you have any questions, you can email me. You're more than welcome to do that. I'm also writing a blog at the minute. So far, it's only from what I've done from Toronto, but that's all I've done so far. So it's up to date from there as well, and I'm also on Twitter. So if you want to. Again, if you've got nothing else to do, then you're more than welcome to kind of read that or send me an email. So thank you very much.